Hi, everyone. We're going to get started this afternoon. I wanted to welcome you to LatinoBuilt's virtual training, Effective Safety Management Improves Profitability, provided by a partnership with LatinoBuilt and Safe Build Alliance, funded by a grant from OSHA, Oregon. I'm Leanna Patron, and I'm the Executive Director of LatinoBuilt. If you would like to receive CCB continuing education credit for this training, please private message me with your company name, and your email address to confirm that you completed the entire training. To keep an efficient flow of this training, there's a few things we want you to follow. This presentation will be and is being recorded, and will be available on our YouTube channel in the next few days following this presentation. Please remain on mute for the duration of this presentation. Use the chat feature to ask questions during the presentation. And for those who are not familiar, you will find your chat button either at the top of your page or on the bottom of your page there. And let's see here. Questions from the chat will be answered during the presentation or at the end, and we will also have a question and answer portion that we will allow you to unmute yourself and enjoy it there. And it is my pleasure now to introduce Ozzy Gonzalez from P3 Consulting, who is our presenter.
Isn't that my cue?
That's your cue.
All right. Good afternoon, everybody. Again, this is Ozzy Gonzalez. I'm Ozzy Gonzalez, the owner and founder of P3 Consulting. And today's presentation is all about how safety and safety programs can actually help your business and your bottom line. I want to begin by thanking LatinoBuilt and Safe Build Alliance for getting together and putting on this series of programs. And I want to thank everybody that's in attendance today. So I've got a program that I've put together. This is the first edition of it, and there's more than enough content to go through today, but I wanted to make sure to emphasize that as I'm going through, if you have questions, feel free to ask them along the way. There's a lot of topics that will be thrown at you. The world of safety is full of jargon, so I want to make sure to throw a bunch of different terms out that some you may be familiar with, some you may never have heard before. So if you have questions, there's no question too simple or too silly to ask. If it's something that I know the answer to, I'm happy to provide it. If not, I'll be bringing some resources at the end of the presentation today. And you'll have a chance to ask follow-up questions because you have my contact info. And I'm covering a lot of different things today, but my goal is to give you an overview because I know that we have companies that are brand new and companies that have been around for over 20 years in the audience. So I want to make sure that I give an overview of terms of some of these ideas. I'm going to make as much time as I can to questions at the end, but I want to make sure that we can have discussion throughout. So with that, I'd like to say there's a couple ways you can ask questions. Let's see, the easiest one is if you put it in the chat. Those are questions everyone can see. I've got it set up so that I'd ask if you're going to have a question. I appreciate you asking for everyone so everyone can see the question as well. I'll be looking at that on the side. And then if you have your camera on, I've got it. I'll do my best to try to keep an eye on folks that got their camera on. You can always raise your hand or use in the chat function. Oh, we don't have the raise hand function here. So you'll be able to put questions in the chat or just physically raise your hand on camera. And if you're if you're not asking questions, I'd appreciate if you could mute your mics because that'll help keep the signal clear. Muy bien, con eso, with that, I might sprinkle in some, thanks for the thumbs up, I might sprinkle in some Spanglish here and there, but I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen. Let's see, I've got a presentation with all sorts of things to look at and ideas to talk about. Déjenme ver, give me a moment. I can walk and chew gum but some reason clicking through computers and talking is where I stumble. Muy bien. So this is so you know you're in the right class. This is all about how safety programs are going to help your bottom line, as I mentioned. And let's see how I can advance. There we go. So I'm going to begin with just a real quick flyby on how safety has shaped itself, safety culture and the safety industry over the years. I'm going to speak a little bit about some of the elements that make up a complete safety program. I'll go over some of the standards that have been established in the industry as far as best practices and some of the metrics that are common throughout the safety industry. And of course, I'll talk about what it has to do with business, how it impacts your bottom line. And in the end, I'll provide resources. Now, I will include you guys if you have resources in relationships, in good consultants, or somebody out there that you know is a good point person for any of the topics we covered today. Please add those resources to the chat box. All of this is getting recorded and there will be an opportunity to share anything you provide in the chat box, whether it's a file or a phone number that we can refer people back to. So it's interactive in that regard. Now, it's been a long while since this was the way people worked, but in the first industrial revolution, safety was not necessarily a conversation that was embedded in construction. It was like, if you want safety, go pick a different job. This construction industry was rough and tumble, and the cost of human life was considered just one of the factors in what it took to build a building. Hoover Dam, Empire State Building, these amazing relics of our history were built knowing that human life would be lost in the process. And in those times, it was just part of the equation. I hate to sound so crass, but we did not have that same relationship with safety as we do today. When OSHA began, the Occupational Safety and Health Administration was formed in 1971 under the Department of Labor. And when they began, there were 14,000 deaths that were estimated in the US in 1970. Now, at that time, we did not count those things very well. We do a much better job since then. And so that 14,000 was an estimate, conservative one by the measures of OSHA. And in 2009, that number went down to 4,340. And so I want to make sure to begin by acknowledging that the journey of safety and what we're talking about here begins and ends with recognizing that your worker, your human resource is your most valuable asset on the job. It's your most valuable tool, and it's what's going to help ensure that your business is a success for the long haul. And that's the place from which safety culture began. Today, it's considered standard. People across the industry, throughout the country, have a common language for safety. There's common standards that have been established, and the industry has developed all sorts of tools and techniques and practices to keep people safe on the job site. The number one goal is to make sure everyone goes home safely that night to their families. And so there's all sorts of tie-off equipment. There's personal protective equipment, and there's all sorts of best practices for fall protection and when you're hanging from heights that people will incorporate into the way they do work. And so those industry standards have now become something normal. There are metrics, I'll get into them in just a sec, and best practices. I'll provide a few more specific examples in a bit. But what has really happened over the years since OSHA was formed is we have gone from safety being something that we have to learn how to do and that the government was showing us the way, to something that companies have demonstrated is worth doing and is worth being leaders in because it helps their companies become stronger. And so there's an expectation in the industry that you have safety policies, practices, that you have safety plans, that you've got folks in your company that are certified in the all the required things for the kind of work you do and to make sure it's done safely. Those things are now expected. Your clients expect you to have it, and your subcontractors, if you're a prime, they expect you to have it. Those are the standards by which we kind of walk onto the job site this day. And if you don't have those things, not only is it a risk to your personal safety and the safety of your workers, but you put a lot of other things at risk. And I want to get into those things here in just a sec. But I like to make sure that I answer the question of why are we doing this? Yes, human life is valuable at all times, but we're also having to keep the lights on. Everybody here is still a business, and there's many ways to keep people alive. Going out of business is one of them, but it's not the ideal. So what does success look like as a construction company that's taking safety to that next level? And here are the ways in which I've thought about what success could potentially look like in your company. And in the end, the North Star is that you have these values of safety embodied in your practices, that you every day, your workers, your job sites, every superintendent is thinking about safety, that safety is something that is part of the job you do every day. It's another tool in your toolbox, and it's one of the most important ones. So it's about embodying those values and to feel that safety is important at every turn. And you do that by having systems in place, monitoring systems that look at your safety record, and having a company culture that not only celebrates safety, but recognizes safe behavior and creates a safe space for that behavior to exist. And this brings me to the most important ingredient in success. And it's what I consider to be coworker trust. Every job site has this tension between, doing the job on time, on budget, getting everything done per spec, and getting on to that next job because we've got work to do. And sometimes safety feels like, well, it might mean I have to put the deadline at risk, or I have to consider price in a different way. I might have to, use that labor might have to be assigned later. This kind of decisions are where you show that embodied value of safety as the way you work. And if it's not done safely, that's not the way you work. In order for coworkers to share that information with each other and be able to point out when someone is not doing something safely, that's a high level of trust that has to be built. Even within your own companies, if you have 5 people in your firm, the level of trust it takes to tell, that fellow welder, hey, you aren't using the proper gloves for that particular application, or you should have some other personal protective equipment for that job. That's the kind of stuff that takes a level of trust that the bosses can help create. And for you out there that are the owners of your companies, creating that company culture begins with you. You have to show that, you have to create the open environment to have those conversations and to build that trust. And again, for prime contractors, that responsibility is really critical for you to own up to and create a job site climate where it's clear that safety is important when people enter that job site. And so building that trust is something that you have to do in an ongoing basis. And there's a lot of ways to do that. And if you do this right, you're going to have a better brand. You're going to have more loyal clients. You're going to have higher retention in your workforce. There's a lot of things that go well once your company is set up for success in that way. Now, There's also components to safety programs. So with that, I'm going to take a little break, and I'm not seeing any questions right now. There's components of safety programs, and I'm going to tell you about what makes them up, but you can take a look at what's on the screen now. I've mentioned a few of these already. And some of this is like corporate speak. I'm talking like policies, practices, and tools. These are the handbooks, the guidebooks, the forms, the checklists. There's a lot of things that you can be providing so that you have an even approach to safety and a common language for safety throughout your company. That's the kind of stuff that begins at the top. And so setting those policies is part of the components of a program. Clearly, safety is something that is an evolving process. So there's always something to learn, and having a training program is also very important. I wouldn't encourage anyone to go too far without beginning to establish clear goals and defining what performance means to you. This is where you have an opportunity to borrow from the industry. I'm going to mention a few of those metrics in a bit, but it's also a place where you have an opportunity to define your own goals and showcase what is most valuable to you. So those are the places where you can actually begin to put that thumbprint, that signature from your company on how you approach safety or how you recognize and celebrate safe behavior. And then we get into a series of components that are really dig down into the jobs themselves. I mean, I'm talking to construction companies, so this is all about running that job site. Having job site specific plans, having a qualified steward on site at the job are elements of a basic safety culture and safety program. And it's important that you also have some protocols in place for when something actually happens. This is something that your safety stewards would be able to probably help you develop. They would certainly be owning this process, and they would be in the position to help train project staff on how to respond to these various types of incidents that could occur on a job site. So those are some of the main things. And then come the paper pushing side of this. Once you have your goals, you have your metrics, you have protocols and plans, you have to be able to start really checking yourself. So having a reporting system in place and having someone to manage your annual OSHA filing is just the other element. These are the compliance pieces of the safety program. So now I'm going to get into a few of the examples of some of this stuff, because I mean, there's the why we do safety. There is what it is that we are, how we measure safety. But then there's what actually does it mean if say, all right, sign me up, we're doing safety programs. Where do we begin? Here's a handful of tasks or tactics that people apply. Site logistic plans, and I'll mention these very briefly. You might have heard of these. Many of you have probably come across these on your jobs already. Many of you might not have known that they came through safety, but these are important elements that can help you build that culture, continue to have the best information, the best practices in place. So a site logistics plan is essentially all about making sure that every project that you own, it has a safe way to approach the site for materials and for personnel to access the site. You have clear standards for what are the behaviors that exist on the site and what happens on the site if the hole gets beyond 20 feet or if if you get beyond 5 floors. Excuse me, I didn't turn off my phone. There we go. If we get beyond 5 floors in height, what kind of safety measures do you begin to implement for fall protection? This is where you evaluate the risks. You look realistically at the site. What's the traffic pattern? What are the safety hazards that exist? And you develop a contingency plan around all of that. So that's something you tend to do when you're chasing a project. It's part of the bidding because mitigating risk can be expensive. So site logistics plans begin when you're proposing on a project, just while you're evaluating whether that project is going to pencil out. Pre-task plans are something you're going to do right before, at the beginning of each day, right before you begin that work. It's a way you look at the risks specific to that day, and it's how you communicate how you, both how you're making them safer and when there's something hazardous happening on the job so that others can be aware. Pre-task plans are an essential piece, and when something goes wrong, it's the first thing people look at. Safety meetings can occur on many, many ways. Stretch and flex is one of the ways in which they can occur. And lunchbox talks are another way in which safety meetings can occur. These are the things that help move the needle on creating a safety culture. They're the ways in which you can bring those new topics up, bring do a training on how to properly complete a pre-task plan. It's where you can share pre-task plans in the morning. Stretch and flex has been used very well as a way to look at what are the safety hazards of that day and to share that across different teams on a large job where you might have 5 or 6 different trades at the same time. Again, lunchbox talks a lot like the way they sound. These are great avenues for using people's attention. Everyone's got to eat. You get them some hot dogs or some pizza. You get some food. Get them in a room. You have the opportunity to really move the needle on a lot of your safety programs. And then, of course, recognizing good behavior. We all like a pat on the back. When a job is well done, we like to know that somebody noticed. And this goes very far in promoting safety culture. So recognition is something that can be done by looking at who hit the best metric, who had the most days without an incident. It could be about who came up with the next greatest idea, or who came up with the next topic, or the theme for that year's safety week. There are many ways you can recognize your staff and engage them in helping be part of that solution. When you depend so much on safety through the eyes and the ears of every worker on that job site, you want to make sure that you recognize them when they're doing that work for you. Let's see. Now I've got to figure out how to make it click. Okay, so here's a couple images of some of these practices in the field. You could see that you might have come across much of these things, pre-task plans occurring on job sites right as a job is about to begin. They're like little 5-minute huddles, and they make all the difference in the world. Signage is utilized heavily on job sites, and this is an opportunity for you to bring your safety information out to people. The example I'm showing here is not the best example because while it's communicating a lot of important information, I'm getting it in one language. And I want to recognize that job sites today have usually people that are coming at the job from a lot of different walks of life. Language access isn't even across jobs, and if you're not putting your signage up in more than one language, you're missing major opportunities to engage people, to make that job site safer, and you know, you're just checking a box. You gotta actually do it for the outcomes. You've all used PPE. I see some being worn right now. I like it. We're not being too unsafe right now, but I like the precaution. And fall protection, it's hard to see in that picture, but if you could take a look at all that netting, that webbing you see, those are to prevent not only people from falling, but debris, tools, hunks of rebar, you know, scaffolding that comes loose, what have you. Those are now measures that general contractors will invest in, because one thing falling is so much more expensive than the cost of that netting. Okay, so these are the precautionary measures by which safety is looked at today. And you know, hazard management, whether it's something falling from above or you falling from above, those are some of the more common. Fall hazards, slips, trips, and falls and caught between are some of the most common ways in which people are hurt on job sites. And so before I get to the business part, I want to cover a couple of these metrics. And this is something that I think is worth either snapping a photo of or making sure you have this type of information down. If you're a business owner especially, it's important that you have a clear understanding of how this plays into your bottom line. Your EMR rate, experience modification rate, is an important piece of it. It's how insurance companies will determine what you pay for insurance. And at the end, they give you a manual premium rate that helps you estimate how your insurances will change as you grow your business. And that's basically based on just how much contract volume you have. Recordable incident rate is a number used a lot by safety professionals. The industry uses it to describe essentially how long have you been going without incidents. But it's a metric that can be used to compare companies large and small, because it's based on your number of labor hours, not just number of days. So, you know, it incorporates how busy you've been. And then there's other elements like days that are restricted or transferred. This is number of days that might have been lost time days due to any side of safety, or I should say health incident. So these are some of the standard metrics. And again, this is a flyby. If you have deeper questions into any of these, there are safety professionals dedicated to helping you estimate these and to help lower your EMR if you needed to. There's very specific ways. So let's see here. I'm gonna take a quick pause because I see some chat here, and then we'll get into the money part. Yes, thank you. So yes, I know that we must operate our businesses every day and be mindful. These are businesses. So let's talk for a second on how safety, or the lack of safety, actually hits your pocketbook. Quick time check. Very good. So the most immediate one I just mentioned in your insurance costs. Your EMR that I talked about before is gonna help determine what your premium rate is. They give you a cents per $1,000. And if your EMR goes from 1.0, 1.0 is average. So if you got an EMR less than 0.75, you're doing pretty good. You got it less than 0.4, you're excellent. You're in the top tier. You're managing a strong safety program. It doesn't mean you're at zero, but it means that comparatively in the industry, you're among the best. If you got an EMR of 1.2, that could mean that your insurance rates could go up as much as 20% from what you were paying the years before. The way EMRs work, you update them every year, and it's always a reflection on how you did last year. And your insurance is betting on whether you're going to lose more money because of hazards next year than you did this year. And that's what your EMR helps predict. So it's a rolling thing. And if your safety programs get better and better every year, your insurance rates get better and better every year. And that could happen while your volume grows. And now we're really cooking with gas. You could see this really impacts your margins, or I should say your elbow room with your margins when you're pricing your jobs. But one of the major things that happens immediately is you might get in the papers. And this could matter a lot to your clients, and it could matter a lot to your company. This is one of those things that you don't always control. How you respond, having good policies, having good procedures in advance, and having good protocols for how to respond make a huge difference in what that storyline will become. But a safety incident could really tarnish your ability to market yourself, your attractiveness to subcontractors. And it not only takes it not only takes you down, it could take the client down. And as far as tarnishing that brand, because the storyline gets out there and the media picks it up, and next thing you know, it's the question on everyone's mind next time you chase a job. And so those things you want to be able to control as best you can. So then these are some of the more obvious things. When something happens on the job, obviously there's some lost time. You're going to have staff that had to drop their tools, stop what they're doing, and they had to go and attend to somebody who might have fallen, who had been injured, who needs some first responders and medical attention. So that day is not going to be as productive as it would have been. On top of that, you clearly might have someone with a laceration. They might have lost a finger, or something that requires an instant medical attention. So, you know, there's those immediate costs of the medical service. But on top of that, you have medical trauma, you have grief counseling. You might have folks that did not fall, but had to be the ones that went with them to the ambulance, and they might be shook the next day. You know, they might not be their best self in a place to be focused and do that important work you need from them. These kind of things become major impacts on your productivity. But beyond that, if you don't have a strong safety program with good protocols, if you're not doing a stand down after a safety incident to really talk with folks on the job, even your subcontractors, about what happened and how you're addressing it, that really impacts morale. So these sorts of things can start to really impact bigger systemic parts of your company. Good people like to work for good companies, and retention will be impacted when you're with a company that is not addressing the safety in the most sincere way, or might be overlooking things where safety was an issue. Somebody might not feel so good about working with that company for very long. It becomes easier to scoop those folks away when you're attracting them to companies that have a much better safety program. So those are just, you know, some of the more obvious ways. There are less obvious ways it's going to impact your business. The paperwork, ay Dios mío, there's a lot of stuff that happens after a safety incident, even if there's no lost time, even if they were able to get back to work that same day. But especially if they were not, if there was a hospitalization, if there is lost time, there's a lot of administrative demands, reports that have to be filed. The company policies might require some reporting. OSHA requires reporting. Your insurance requires reporting. You might have some report out to the job site so that everyone can understand what happened and how you've remedied it. All of these things are part of the administration. Now, for attendants, folks on the job site, many times this includes presentations to management. You've got to go and kind of break down what happened to them. My aurora borealis is falling. You could find out what happened to them, and then there's the corrective actions. There's the things that you might have learned from this incident. It might be a guardrail system that you thought was good, but you no longer rely on. Whatever changes have to happen on the job site. Those things take a whole process. You know, someone's got to approve it, or you've got to roll that out. That administration is an ongoing thing. So these do become robust pieces of your organization, much like accounting does when you get larger and larger projects. And then there's the part that is my least favorite of all, the legal costs. Are there any lawyers in the audience? I don't see anyone dressed in suits. There are unpredictable legal costs around addressing safety incidents. This whole notion of safety and the protections for workers on job sites has created both safety nets for people that are in the industry and want to go home to their families, but it's also created opportunities for people to take advantage of something. And navigating that as a business owner does require having folks on staff or perhaps as consultants to help you through that. There's a lot of things that can happen even when there is no fraud, just to investigate a case. Those sorts of things are still representing costs. And of course, workers' compensation claims could be open-ended and expose companies for long-term costs. And those are the reasons why lawyers get involved and why you have insurance. Now, interestingly enough, I mentioned there's some obvious things and there's some not so obvious things that come when safety incidents occur. Productivity losses and medical services are the most obvious. But I wanted to show you this iceberg effect image to really illustrate how the largest impacts to your business are the less obvious costs that come to your company because of either a poor safety program or safety incidents. Those are the things that really ding your business. And it's important to acknowledge that at first, these things don't seem like they are the job itself, much like they didn't seem that way in the beginning. When safety first started, it did slow down work, and it did make things take a little longer and make them a little more expensive. But when they factored in how much was saved in human life, in the risks and the anguish that comes with having to, confront somebody having a health incident on a job site, those compliance requirements quickly became best practices. And so now, as we move ahead in the industry, it's important to know that, whether you're a painter, a drywaller, a welder, no matter your trade, you're now in an industry where your job is not just to build the building per spec. You are also creating jobs, enriching communities, helping bring back our economies from COVID. You're doing some important lifting. You're training apprentices. You're doing so much more than building a building. So, as business owners, it's important to know that the more you accept and acknowledge that other piece of your equation, the better you will be at not only talking about it with your clients and your employees, but the better you're going to be at really putting it into the company culture. And safety is a really powerful one. So with that, I'm going to open it up for discussion and questions, but I wanted to make sure that you guys had some resources here. For those that are in Oregon, I'm sorry if there's anyone from Washington, I totally didn't mean to ignore you, but I was focusing on Oregon for now. There are equivalent resources in Washington, but OSHA is one of your best resources. They have training materials. They have videos in English and Spanish. If you want your employees to understand why having ANSI approved, having the little ANSI number on their goggles is important, then OSHA has videos that show you what happens when a piece of debris hits those goggles versus one that does not have that standard. They look the same, the goggles, they might cost different, but when you see those videos, you really understand that this safety thing is not just a series of gimmicks. They're really there to help you stay safer. So yeah, with that, I wouldn't want to leave without acknowledging Safe Build Alliance as a great resource. They have, not only do they have some tools and tips from all of their members that are involved in safety programs, but they have a mentorship program that you can be involved in, where you get to sit across the desk of a mentor that's part of a large company with a robust safety program, and they get to show you their forms and their tools. That's a really valuable resource. And I would say, however you approach this, making it your own and making sure that your employees feel like this is about valuing them I think you're gonna hit the right marks for success and safety. So con eso, yeah, I'm gonna leave this one. Let me see. I'm gonna leave this up for a second. If you guys have any questions, I see a few coming up. I'll answer a few here, and then you're welcome to unmute. I can't do hand raising, or pop in for discussion. I see a great chat about resources here, asking people to add their information. I've been asked to address to address COVID and COVID requirements on the job. There's some, say, the OSHA requirements do have some resources now. If you go to the website where you can go get information about COVID, there are some local resources through Prosper Portland. If you need signage for your job sites, or you need some N95 masks, what has occurred has been that much of the PPE requirements that we've had for certain tasks have been extended to ensuring people have masks on and personal protection from the moment they access the job site, not just around their jobs. There are, I think, Safe Build Alliance might have some better resources if you have specific questions about your job site. What I have seen on job sites so far have been screening measures where people are asked to fill out a questionnaire before they enter that job site for the first time, where they read about what symptoms are that they should look for. They have temperature sensors or some sort of face scanner that lets them take a quick temperature reading, and it also checks them in. So those sorts of measures have been implemented now as a sort of a checkpoint. Hand sanitizer and masks at the entry point to jobs. I've seen as supplies that are located alongside things like where you hang your helmets and your vests. There are cleaning measures now that I think have been applied in like break rooms and lunch areas where there's shared spaces. They've had people come in and have some more frequent cleaning, and so having that sort of measure has been more important. They've changed break room policies so that people have food in closed containers, in bags, and they take that out. So, no more of that shared mustard for now, that kind of stuff. Those are the things that come to mind right now, though I wouldn't call them requirements as much as best practices, because the industry of construction was designated as essential workers. There wasn't the same prerequisite as there was with like a barber, for example, on making sure that certain things were in place before they could open their business. And that's, I don't know if that's a good or bad thing. I'm not going to take a side on that one, but I will say having the essential worker status means you're going to have more best practices and less requirements. But monitoring people's symptoms, and temperature checks have continued to be one of the more accessible and common ways of making sure that people on the job site are staying safe. So so I don't know if there's things beyond what I just mentioned that people are doing on their job sites right now. But I'd welcome any input. If someone's doing something that hasn't been mentioned, I think those are important to share. Feel free to put them in the chat or chime in. There. Now at least we could look a little bit. All right. Muy bien. So I appreciate the questions, and let's see, I feel like I want to pull the audience a little bit now, because I see within the participants, there's some that are more GC and some that are specific to trades. I wonder how many of you guys already have folks on staff that do your site safety plans. Is that a job that you do, or do you have a dedicated person that does them for your jobs? Like safety planning, I'm curious myself how that happens on your jobs today. And Eric, I see you. So I was wondering, hey, hello, sir. I would, so I don't mean to put you on the spot, but I'm gonna try for a second here. Do you, when, I'm not, could you introduce yourself? What trade does your company work in? And how do you guys, when and how do you guys look at safety on a job?
Eric, I'm Nexus Electrical Group. I started a company a couple years ago, just kind of getting off the ground. But most of it just takes place with a pre-task plan at the beginning of a job in the morning, and then just kind of revisit safety issues throughout the day. But definitely having a plan at the get-go, and then social distancing, masks, setting time, having different trades come in at different times is helpful as well. So if the GC, the scheduling is really important, where you can have one trade come in one day, you have another trade come in another day. I find that's probably the best, what I found, is if we can get in there a day when the other trades aren't in there. And thanks for putting me on the spot.
Of course, Eric. It's easier to find those that don't have their camera on. No, well, that's now, does anyone have horror stories on where there was where something really impacted your business? Whether it's legal fees, administrative, where it really impacted a project that they're willing to share.
I'll just chime in for one quick second, but I have heard stories of companies taking the proper precautions, and then when it comes to wells, egress, I've heard of electricians working in a stairwell, other trades coming through there, everybody's in close quarters, and then spreading a little bit of COVID, I guess. And then that seems to have an effect on the whole project. So passing in stairwells, working in stairwells, guys are working, you've got elevators going up, especially in the summertime, people are sweating, breathing hard. I've heard of that. So, but it hasn't happened, nothing I've been affected by.
Good catch. Stairwells present, enclosed stairwells in projects do present extra hazardous areas for the spread of COVID, because they are enclosed and people are usually brushing past each other.
Well, great. Unless we have any last minute questions, we're coming to the very end. Any last minute? Well, great. With that, I want to thank Ozzy. Both LatinoBuilt and Safe Build Alliance would like to thank Ozzy for this great information and his time that he's brought to us. I would also like to mention that Ozzy is one of our very first members at LatinoBuilt, and we love having him on board here as well. I'm going to share my screen one last time with you guys. Course. Ready? Loading on my end. Okay. Please contact us. Follow us. Here's our contact information. Oops, did I lose my slide? Sorry about that. There we go. Email us. Our website has tons of great resources, including our safety page, and everything is bilingual. We have Facebook, we have LinkedIn, we have an e-newsletter, and then of course subscribe to our YouTube channel. You'll find this video if you need to share it with the rest of the people at your company, your employees, or management, and so forth there. And we are so thankful for your participation today. Thank you so much.
Thanks again, everyone. I left my contact info in the comments.